For those of you who grew up in the church, did any of you have favorite Bible stories? Yeah. Maybe it was Noah and the ark because of all of the animals. Maybe it was David battling Goliath because God helped the little guy beat the big guy. Or maybe it was Jesus walking on water because, that's freaking awesome. I definitely tried to walk on water at the pool by thinking about Jesus really hard. And I'm probably not the only one. I don't know, maybe I'm weird. But it's funny. My favorite Bible story was actually really obscure. It was one of the lesser known ones. One that it was only a couple of verses long, and most people don't even remember it. See, one of the things my mom did very well when I was a kid was making sure I was completely immersed in Bible stories. Now, I would read them sometimes, my mom would read them to me, but usually they came in the form of animated TV shows. And in one of those shows, no idea what it was called, it had a bunch of stories of Jesus from the New Testament. And I can't picture any other story from those videos except for this one. I obviously know all the stories because I'm a pastor and all. I've read the Bible and stuff. But I can't actually picture how any of the other scenes look in the show. But this one I can remember very clearly. It comes from Mark chapter 12, if any of you are curious. Jesus was in the temple with his disciples, sitting opposite where the offering was being collected. And there were many rich men depositing large amounts of money into the bowl. In the classic cartoon style, all these ornately dressed dudes with overly colorful robes with jiggling bags of coins. And when they threw in the money into the plate, there were jewels and rings and all sorts of other expensive items. But as Jesus watched all of this, an old woman, hunched over with age, shuffled up to the offering place. She stood silent for a moment and looked down in her hand. And in it sat a few copper coins, worth no more than a few cents. But the woman carefully counted out the coins, stepped up to the bowl and carefully deposited all of them, before quietly walking away without pomp and circumstance. And Jesus turned to his disciples and said this: "Truly I tell you, this poor widow has put more into the treasury than all the others. They all gave out of their wealth, but she, out of her poverty, put in everything, all she had to live on." This story, to me, meant that we all have something to give. God does not care how much or how little we have to offer him. It's never about the quantity. It's about the heart. It's been a long and exciting journey through Philippians, has it not? For those of you who may just be joining us, or those who have missed some days, we spent the last few months going over Paul's letter to the Philippians. I believe we started all the way back at the end of June. Crazy, right? How time flies. Paul has been locked up in prison by the Romans for the practice and preaching of his faith. Things were grim. He was to stand trial, and there could be no appeal. If he lost, he would be sentenced to die and executed. And although Paul was likely afraid and distraught, he remained steadfast. He felt that it was not yet his time, and he had faith that God would see him through. He practiced radical acceptance, that is, accepting his circumstances with grace, and found contentment even during a time that to many others would have brought great despair. But even more than simple contentment, he was downright optimistic. He viewed these new hardships as an opportunity to serve God in places where he never would have been otherwise, and to people he never would have met otherwise. He preached to his fellow prisoners, to the guards, to the courts, to the passers-by, and to anyone who would listen. But he did not do it alone, hence the creation of this letter. For the Philippian church had sent one of their own, a man named Epaphroditus, to assist Paul and deliver to him gifts from their church. And although Epaphroditus had grown ill, and though there had been some miscommunications about Epaphroditus' condition, Paul was abundantly grateful for all the help the Philippian church had provided. Years prior, in the Roman military colony of Philippi, Paul had evangelized and founded a church. And even after all this time, the church in Philippi never forgot the apostle and the preacher whom they loved. They often sent him gifts, aid, and letters. In fact, Paul says in chapter 4, verses 15 through 16, "Moreover, as you Philippians know, in the early days of your acquaintance with the gospel, when I set out for Macedonia, not one church shared with me in the matter of giving and receiving, except only you. For even when I was alone in Thessalonica, you sent me aid more than once when I was in need." And it is because of this, their great love and generosity towards Paul, that Philippians is known as one of Paul's most joyful and affectionate letters. Paul issues several exhortations, that is, he warns them of certain issues, urges them towards what is good, offers words of wisdom and guidance. But unlike most of his other letters, there is no sharp rebuke or call to repentance. There is no need, and instead he offers them words of kindness and praise. For their great generosity had gone a very long way in helping with the work of the church, and also for their own spiritual development. Generosity. It's one of the more overlooked Christian qualities. Generally, it's reserved more for Christmas time with all the gift giving and the charity events, or sometimes reserved for sermons on tithing. Wink, wink. I'm just kidding, of course. This isn't a sermon on tithing. Sometimes we shy away from talking about generosity in the church because it's often associated with money. And of course, it is true that we should be generous with our money. After all, Paul was greatly supported by the gifts that the Philippians gave him. And tithing is what allows much of ministry to happen, both here and out in the wider world. But generosity encompasses more than just money and gifts, and it goes out to more than just our church. If you recall, Epaphroditus was sent to Paul not only to deliver gifts, but also to offer his assistance in the form of service. He was generous with his service and his time. And I know that there are many of you who have gifts and talents that you use for the benefit of others. I also know that there are many of you out there who I would consider to be prayer warriors. Maybe you have a list of people you pray about and a schedule for praying for them. Maybe you pray on an ongoing basis. Whenever something comes up, whenever anyone needs prayer, you just send up a short prayer to the Lord. Or maybe you do both, or fall somewhere in between. But you can be generous with your prayers, willing to pray for anyone at any time. Perhaps you're the kind of person with very high emotional intelligence and compassion. And when met with others, whether they be friends or enemies or simply random people you interact with once and then never again, you are always generous with your kindness and your forgiveness. But the point is that generosity is about far more than just throwing money at a charity or tossing a 20 in the offering plate as you walk into the sanctuary. In fact, generosity is about more than just giving. Generosity means to give selflessly. It's a posture, almost, an openness that we have with others. Because you see, when Paul thanks and praises the Philippians for the gifts and services that they have given to him, he also says this: "Not that I desire your gifts. What I desire is that more be credited to your account." In the Eastern Standard Version of the Bible, it's translated as, "Not that I seek the gift, but I seek the fruit that increases to your credit." What he means is that the most important thing to him is their spiritual development. He is grateful for their gifts, but his true goal is seeking that they bear spiritual fruit, or that they would experience spiritual growth as a result of their generosity. When a person practices generosity, it actually makes us feel better. It makes us better people. As I found in the Psychology Today article, generosity, what's in it for you? One 2003 study found that generosity actually promotes both mental and physical health. Another 2007 study found that men who volunteered regularly had a death rate of 2.5 times less than men who didn't. It reduces stress and it supports the immune system. Being generous literally has health benefits. It's ingrained in us. And while that's all fine and dandy, the most relevant and important benefit of generosity to us as Christians is that it turns our focus outward. It's natural as humans for our attention to focus mostly inward. We spend most of our time with ourselves. We decide what kind of person we want to be. We receive both the benefits and consequences of our actions. And so our focus is on us, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but often having too much focus on the self leaves us with greater self-criticism, greater isolation. We get too focused on our own needs, our own desires and choices, our own little worlds. We get too stuck in our own heads. But generosity shifts that focus outward onto others. We grow to notice our neighbors more, we listen more, we understand more, and we become more empathetic. We connect with people, freeing us from our isolation and bringing us into greater community with our neighbors. And we're given a sense of purpose because what we do, what we give, is greater than ourselves. Generosity, true and selfless giving, helps us learn to be more Christ-like. But even beyond all the psychology and health benefits and all that jazz, you might still be worried. What have I to give? What could I possibly offer to the Lord? What if my giving, whether it be time or money or effort, leaves me in need? But we have assurance. As Paul closes out his thanksgiving to his people, he assures them that God will provide for the Philippians. This may imply that they had, in fact, given to the point where they themselves were in need. Surely Epaphroditus gave more of himself to the point where he got deathly sick in his pursuit to assist Paul. But God gives both the Philippians and us assurance that Christ will provide for all of our needs according to the riches of his glory. There was once a story I heard long ago. I don't know if it's an actual true story, but it went something like this. Back during the Great Depression, times were tough. Perhaps you remember from your history lessons, but there was a great dust bowl over much of the United States, meaning there were frequent dust storms that made farming near impossible. Everyone was in need, and many people fled their homes to seek more livable conditions. There were 2 families during these times. Both families were fortunate enough to have a solid supply of food and water. But how the families treated their supplies was much different. The first family hoarded it all. They kept all of it locked up in a closet, rid of anyone who might steal it. And when anyone came looking for help, the family turned them away. But the second family saw the plight of their neighbors and had compassion on them. And when others came to search for help, they welcomed those who needed it and gave what they could. The first family scoffed at this. They said that the second family was foolish, that they would not be pressured into helping once the second family's provision inevitably ran dry. And over time, this did become a great concern. The second family had gone through much of their supply and were beginning to worry that they might run out. But word of their generosity had spread. And all those whom the family had helped began sharing their own supplies with them and with others, whatever they had or could find or produce. And throughout the entire Dust Bowl, throughout the entire Great Depression, the second family always found that they had plenty. But the second family remained isolated, keeping for themselves what they had. That is, until one day when they went to retrieve more food from their locked closets. And although their locks and security had prevented others from taking their supplies, the same could not be said for the rats that now infested the room. Not one strap was left untouched. And as the first family approached the door of the second to ask for help, they suddenly and finally understood the importance of generosity. We need not fear being generous because God will always provide for our needs tenfold. And so, as we close out our series on Philippians, I ask that you look back on our long series. Remember all that we learned about contentment and opportunities and sufferings. Remember our lessons on discernment and unity. Remember the caution that was given about our merit badges and our appetites. But most importantly, let us remember the love and the joy that was shared between Paul and the Philippians. For it was through their love and kindness, the selfless generosity that they showed one another, that God did incredible things. In the Roman world, in the life of the church for centuries since then, and even here in this very sanctuary. And as we move on to new books, new scriptures, and new sermons, remember to live generously. Because you never know what incredible things God can do with what we give. Would you pray with me this morning? Dear Lord, help us to open our eyes. Keep them on you. Help us turn our focus from ourselves to our inside, getting stuck in our own little worlds, and help us to turn outward, to open ourselves up to the world around us, to the people around us. Help us to join into community with them. Help us to give of ourselves into the world so that we might bring your kingdom ever closer and bring your glory to fruition. Lord, we pray this in your precious name.